I am not a superstitious man. I grew up in a practical family. My father was an engineer. My mother was a nurse. Nobody in my house ever talked about ghosts or spirits or things that couldn't be explained. You had a problem. You found the logical answer. That was all. I tell you this so you understand that what I am about to describe, I have no explanation for. I worked as a night security guard for 3 years at a decommissioned psychiatric facility on the outskirts of Lisbon. I won't name it. People who know the area will know which one I mean. It had been closed for over a decade when I started working there. The owners were in a legal dispute over the land. Nobody was doing anything with it. They just needed someone to make sure nobody broke in. Most nights were completely uneventful. I'd do my rounds, check the perimeter, sit in my car, drink my coffee, go home. The building was enormous, 4 floors, 2 wings, dozens of rooms, but after the first few weeks it stopped feeling intimidating. It was just a building, empty and cold, but just a building. That changed on a Tuesday night in February. It was around 2 in the morning. I was doing my interior round on the 2nd floor, the East Wing. This was the ward where the more severely ill patients had been kept. The rooms were smaller here. The doors were heavier. Some of them still had the small observation windows cut into them, little rectangles of reinforced glass at eye level. I was walking the corridor with my torch when I heard something. A knocking sound, slow and rhythmic, coming from one of the rooms further down the hall. My first thought was an animal. Pigeons got into the building sometimes through broken windows on the upper floors. A bird trapped in a room and panicking could make all kinds of noise. I walked toward the sound. The knocking was coming from behind the 3rd door on the left, room 214. I looked through the observation window. The room was empty. Just 4 bare walls, a rusted bed frame bolted to the floor, and a single broken window on the far wall. The knocking had stopped the moment I looked through the glass. I unlocked the door and checked inside. Nothing. No bird. No animal. No explanation for the sound. I locked the room and continued my round. 20 minutes later, I was on the 3rd floor when I heard it again. The same slow, rhythmic knocking from directly below me, room 214. I went back down, looked through the observation window again. The room was empty. But the bed frame, which had been bolted to the floor, which had not moved in probably 30 years, had been pulled 18 inches away from the wall. I called my supervisor. He told me it was probably the structure settling in the cold. Old buildings do that. I wrote it in my report and went home. The next night, I requested to swap to the West Wing rotation. My supervisor asked me why. I told him the truth. He laughed, but he gave me the West Wing. 3 weeks later, the guard who replaced me on the East Wing rotation quit without notice. He refused to say why. I never asked. I still drive past that building sometimes on my way to work. I never look at the 2nd floor windows. We had been exploring abandoned buildings together for almost 4 years before this happened. We had a system. We had rules. We never went anywhere without researching it first. We never went at night. We always told someone where we were going and when to expect us back. We broke every single one of those rules the day we found the hospital. We were driving back from a completely different location, an abandoned textile factory outside Porto that turned out to be completely inaccessible when my partner spotted it from the road. a large institutional building set back behind a rusted iron fence, almost completely hidden by overgrown trees. No signs, no boards on the windows, just a building that looked like it had been forgotten. We pulled over. It took us less than a minute to find a gap in the fence. The main entrance was sealed, but a side door had been forced open at some point, probably by someone else who had been there before us. We had our cameras, but only one torch between us. It was 4 in the afternoon. We told ourselves we'd be out before dark. The ground floor was unremarkable. Reception area, administrative offices, a long corridor leading to what had been a dining hall. Peeling paint, broken glass, the particular smell of a building that has been sealed for too long. We had seen it all before. The basement was her idea. The stairwell was at the far end of the main corridor. The door was unlocked. We went down. The basement was different from upstairs, colder. The ceilings were lower. The corridor was narrower, and unlike the ground floor, which had been stripped of most of its furniture and equipment, the basement looked like it had been abandoned mid-operation. Trolleys still in the corridors, filing cabinets still against the walls, doors still closed. We started opening doors. The first 3 rooms were storage. Old linen, broken equipment, rusted canisters. The 4th room was larger. A single reclining chair bolted to the center of the floor, leather straps still attached to the armrests and legs, medical equipment along the walls, a trolley with instruments we couldn't identify. We didn't stay long in that room. The 5th door was locked. Not sealed, locked. A padlock, new, noticeably newer than everything else in the building. We looked at each other. Neither of us said anything. We both understood what a new padlock on a door inside an abandoned building meant. Someone was coming here. Someone had a reason to keep this room closed. We left immediately. We didn't run, but we moved fast. Back up the stairs, back through the main corridor, back out the side door. When we got to the gap in the fence, my partner grabbed my arm. There was a car parked behind ours that hadn't been there when we arrived, a dark saloon car, no plates. We got in our car and drove. We reported it to the local police the next day, anonymously. We described the location and the padlocked room. We never heard anything more about it. We still talk about that padlock, about what was behind that door. We've never gone back to find out. And we made a new rule after that day. Basement doors that are locked, stay locked. My grandmother worked as a nurse at a psychiatric hospital in central Portugal for over 30 years. She retired in the late 1980s, shortly before the facility was closed. She never talked about her work, not once. In all the years I knew her, she never mentioned a single patient, a single incident, a single memory from that place. When she died 4 years ago, we were clearing out her apartment and I found a shoebox at the top of her wardrobe. Inside were documents, old admission forms, handwritten patient notes, medical records dating back to the 1960s. I don't know why she kept them. I don't know how she took them out of the facility. I should have handed them to the relevant authorities immediately. Instead, I sat down on the floor of her bedroom and started reading. Most of what I read I won't repeat here. The conditions those patients endured, the treatments, the isolation, the things done to them in the name of medicine, I had no idea. Nobody talks about what happened in those places. Nobody wants to remember. But it was the photograph at the bottom of the box that I can't stop thinking about. It was a standard institutional photograph, black and white, a group of nurses standing in a corridor, formally posed. My grandmother was in the front row. She looked young. It must have been taken early in her career. I almost put it aside. Then I looked more carefully at the background. The corridor behind the nurses stretched back into the darkness. At the very edge of the frame, barely visible in the shadows, at the far end of the corridor, there was a figure. Not a nurse, not a doctor, a patient in a hospital gown, standing completely still and facing the camera directly. Every person in the photograph was looking at the camera, except my grandmother. She was looking slightly to the side, away from the group, away from the camera. She was looking directly at the figure at the end of the corridor. I showed the photograph to my mother. She went very quiet for a long time. Then she told me something she had never told me before. She said that in the last few weeks of my grandmother's life, when she was in hospital and heavily medicated, she would sometimes wake up in the night in distress. The nurses would find her sitting upright in bed, staring at the corner of the room, completely rigid. When they asked her what she was looking at, she always gave the same answer. She would say, "She's been waiting for me for a very long time." My mother always assumed she was confused, medicated, dreaming. I looked at that photograph for a long time after my mother told me that. I don't know who the figure at the end of the corridor is. I don't know why my grandmother kept that photograph for 40 years, but I think she knew exactly who it was. And I think she spent her whole life trying not to remember. 3 stories, 3 places that Portugal sealed away and tried to forget. The patients are gone, the records are lost, the buildings are crumbling. But something in those walls doesn't seem to know that. If something has happened to you, something real, something you've never been able to explain, send it to us. The email is in the description below. I'm Hollow Dark. Subscribe. New horror every week. And whatever you do tonight, don't open doors that should stay closed.